Yeah,
What?
eventually.
Time has come to talk of cabbages and kings.
Wow.
You've gone polysyllabic on it, Steve. It's a little
I
worrisome.
think I'm delving into Lewis Carroll here, right?
Okay,
In the twilight zone.
all right.
Anyways, I passed out to all the board members a draft of a letter that I put together to go to the Select Board, Board of Health, and the Zoning Board of Appeals to inform them that we took a motion at our last meeting, okay? I'm not asking you to make a motion on this or anything right now. I can date it at any time that's necessary. I did include, Ken, a little line in there about well, they need to do this or have offsets, per your sort of concern, okay?
Yeah, I
So-
mean,
So I'm just passing this out, take a look at it, pass any comments back, and then probably at the next meeting, if everybody's comfortable, I'll circulate an official letter for everybody to sign and that we can distribute to the boards, okay?
Yeah. And my only
Basically,
comment on the
cover letter.
offsets is even with the 3 milligrams per liter, what will the loading be relative to what the permissible load?
Yeah, we had a number of months ago on that, so I can resurface it for you, okay?
It's basically a cover letter for the state, the motion that we already approved.
Yeah, we made a motion, but now we need to convey it to these 3 boards. So I took a stab at writing a letter saying that, you know, we're asking you as boards who have authority to notify the
The one thing, I did talk to Noreen at ZBA, and of course, the hearing is closed,
Correct.
so I don't know what they can do in terms of taking this into account, but.
Well, the issue here is that the wastewater is under the purview of the DEP, not the ZBA.
There you go.
So, you know, okay. All right, welcome, everybody. See the usual cast of interested citizens and those at home, welcome aboard. Anyhow, hope everybody got through the folks on Main Street okay. First item on our agenda is a discussion and recommendations to the town manager's office on IA subsidy. Steve, you created a table that you circulated.
Want me to say something about it?
Yeah, I want you to pick this up. Yeah.
Thank you all for reading and contributing to this. The point of the numbers was just to sort of get them out of the way before the meeting. I didn't want someone to say, well, no, it's really 37,000, not 36,000. Because in my mind, those details don't matter for this. My main point is that, well, I'll make the case for the way I think it could go. Ultimately, it's political, and we can't tell the select board what to do. I think we should give them our reasoning and the principles that we consider. But my own bias is the term betterment for sewers is way older than people's concern about nitrogen. It was for people's selfish concern about their own properties. The reason sewers were put in and the reason people politically were willing to pay for it was because it made their property better than if they just had a Title V system. All right, and by the way, this has nothing to do with which is better, Title V, traditional IA, or urine diversion. And it really has nothing to do with urine diversion at this point. It's just IAs. For instance, the capital cost for sewers is in areas where sewers are economically feasible. In the areas where we plan to put IAs, sewers would be much more expensive than 36,000. So that's another reason why you can't compare that here. But to get back to the betterment thing, it was called a betterment because instead of having to take care of a septic system, and maybe having bubbling up in your backyard during your 4th of July party, as the septic pumping advertise, you have the town taking care of all of it. With an IA or a urine diversion, you're not getting any of that because you still have a Title V. So your property, except from an altruistic sense that you're helping the whole community remove nitrogen, you're actually making your property worse. So instead of you paying the town a betterment, one could argue the town ought to pay you a worsement. And so the only beneficiaries of the traditional IA or the urine diversion are all the people living around the estuary and visitors and the whole rest of the town and the reputation of the town. It's not helping that property owner, except to the extent that they're a citizen like everyone else and living around the estuary. So you could argue at the upper end that the subsidy or the worsement should be 100%. Anything less than that is arbitrary and political, and I don't know how to make that decision. I think that's up to the select board. And I'm interested in everybody else's opinion.
Take a stab at it, Ed?
No.
By the way, it's not a matter of incentive, because it will be required. So you could say, tough, you have to pay for the whole thing and you have to do it, or we'll put a tax lien on your house.
Pay for what whole thing, the IA?
The IA.
Or the UD?
Either one.
Well, I think we have to have some basic understanding and concepts of which direction you go. One consideration I listed is subsidies only in mandated areas. That seems to make sense. Why subsidize something that's in an outlying district up in East Hatchville that really...
Oh, that goes without
So
saying.
where do you limit the subsidy? Somebody in that area may say, I want to put in an IA because it's the right thing to do for the environment. God bless them, but...
No, they don't get subsidized.
Well, that's a decision.
Yes.
Another even more basic decision on top of that is defining the mandated areas. Now,
That's later in this meeting.
I
Those are the
understand
geo.
that, and it's later in this year. It won't be at this meeting, but it's something to keep in our minds as we think about this and the implications of it, because the implications are far-reaching. It's a precedent-setting concept that has only been used in very limited cases. As I said, I think at the last meeting, there are a couple of hundred active IAs now in town. 20 or 30 of them that I know of in West Falmouth were subsidized via some grant money and the Buzzards Bay Coalition.
Yeah.
It's currently, from what I understand, the SUP is now doing the monitoring of those systems. But they got a subsidy, a pretty extensive one from what I heard, but I don't know the numbers. But now you've got probably another couple of hundred IAs that people put in. A few of them may have been mandated, but some of them just because they said, it's probably coming, I'll do it now. No subsidy. So you've got these folks that already made the investment of 50, I know of one that was $150,000 to put in an IA just this spring. And they had the cesspool, and they had to do something, so they went right to the nth degree of expense, but they got no subsidy. So, would you ever consider going retroactively and give them money back? Probably not. But what's fairness to them if you're going to subsidize other folks that do it going forward? Tough concepts in my mind, and I'm having a lot of trouble wrapping my head around it, but items to consider. So mandated areas, well, we're looking at, and Kristen's doing some great analysis, as always, of, well, to meet the PRB for a watershed, we've got a big
TMDL.
And TMBL.
Yeah, I'm getting PRB on the brain.
Too many
lately.
acronyms.
That's another hobby
Sorry,
of mine.
TMDL.
To meet the TMDL, we've got to do, let's just say, 20% of the houses in a watershed. But if the state mandate went through, they would all have to do it. And that, we may say, we're going to mandate this 20%. And after 5, 10, 20 years, you say, uh-oh, we didn't go far enough. We should have gone, instead of 300 feet, we should have gone 1,000 feet, or 600 feet, or the whole damn watershed once and for all, because that's what the state will eventually decree, should we not clean up that estuary. So where do you say, mandate it, and do you come up with, I think Steve Rafferty came up with some numbers, rough accounting stuff that seemed pretty accurate, you know, a couple of million a year in a subsidy budget to support this. That's asking a lot of the town. And do you do that in perpetuity or just for the first decade? Where do you draw that line? I mean, this thing kind of snowballs into a nightmare of complexity. You mentioned costs and what's fair, because, you know, a sewer, it's a one-shot deal and it's an improvement to the property. It's called a betterment for the reason it betters your property, makes it more valuable, and it's glaringly obvious how much more valuable that is. It's wonderful. I have a sewer. It cost me a ton of money, but I'm glad I have it. I didn't want it in the first place, but I'm glad I got it. The numbers reflect real costs, which is great, because I know you put a lot of effort into getting realistic numbers. But the subsidy under a sewer is 30% of the cost of that sewer line. It does not subsidize at all work on your property. When I did mine, I had to dig 8 feet down and 8 feet wide because the sand trench kept coming in, and I had 120 odd or 130 feet of sewer line. Cost me about $8,000 at the Little Pond Sewer Project. I could and did take advantage of the state tax credit because I was working at the time and had income. And that basically paid for my lateral. I mean, it just, you know, took that cost down to a very minimal number because of the state tax credit over, I think it was a 3 or 4 year period. The town subsidy only covers that sewer main. So, you know, again, we say, well, all right, we're going to maybe subsidize IAs or UDs, and I think that's the impetus for this discussion is your group, Steve Layton, is looking for an idea of what we're looking at for subsidies IAs as they develop the policy for possible UD program. So what is fair when you're talking about on-property costs versus out in the mains, in the street, and where does the town draw a line? I would think at the very least, we probably should consider, if we ever got to an IA subsidy, it's 30% of the actual cost, just like the subsidy that a betterment gives to offset some of your betterment cost. In effect, you're subsidizing the main to the extent of 30% of the cost instead of the homeowner paying it all. So that's probably a benchmark that I would be comfortable with a maximum amount, because if you know, say somebody's going to spend $150,000 on a system because that's what they want and the complexity of their property, gosh, are you going to go 30% of that, or are you going to say, hey, 10,000 max, or 5,000 max, or 20,000 max, some peak number? So I would suggest we consider a maximum amount on any subsidy. And maybe you consider, who do you subsidize? The early adopters only? Like, let's use your earned diversion, because I think that was the impetus for the discussion. Do you say, look, we are considering and recommending a subsidy of X dollars for fixed systems, because that would at least give us good data, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 toilets with a collection tank, so you're getting a fixed, disciplined amount. It's not at the whim of, geez, I really don't feel like a QB today, but, you know, I'm going to use my hard pipe thing because I invested in it to the tune of 70% of the cost, if you adopted my recommendation. But you say very clearly that the subsidy is only to encourage participation in the program, to develop relevant data that may encourage widespread adoption. Once you've done it, and you're not going to subsidize somebody with a QB. The working group that Tom and I and one of our selectmen and a couple of other folks were on said, you know what, let's subsidize those ancillary data folks that are using portable devices to the extent of collecting their urine at pound cost. subsidize the collection of that urine. The woman from McCoy mentioned, I think, that, she had wasted come down, cost her $100 to pump out her barrels. So I think it'd be reasonable, only under the test conditions, to support that. Subsidy only for the early adopters for this 3-4 year test program. So those are some of the thoughts I had, things that I think we should consider. I know in your chart, you mentioned homeowner optionality. And, you don't have any if you're in the sewer district. Thou shalt, you must connect.
That's what the table says.
Yes, I'm reading your table. And you get to IAs, and yes, we will have some mandates in this community to some extent as we go forward, hopefully by the end of the year. Would we ever mandate UD? I think that's a huge maybe. I don't think.
No,
I mean,
no,
but
nobody
it's,
thinks that. That was
SIA
what
or
this was intended to say, that the only choice you have is IA or UD, if you're in one of those areas.
Well, and that's to be determined to see if we can get any.
Well,
relevant-
if UDs fly,
Yes,
that's
yes,
your
with
choice.
that caveat.
If UDs don't fly, you have no choice, you have to get an
This is
IA.
a new concept, flying UDs.
Well,
Yeah, stay indoors.
it's all part of the porta potties. So, and the other, low-interest loan potentials, I mean, we're waiting, and we're probably going to wait a long time for direction from DEP on the whole urine diversion concept. That's a rope that's going to be hard to push, and I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But, at some length, those were my considerations as I studied your chart and thought about what the implications are of this policy and how the precedent-setting nature of this. And one of my all-important caveats is, let's look at what the other towns are doing. And the only subsidies I'm aware of for IAs are on the vineyard, and it's only because they got a pot of ARPA money to play around with. But they are they did offer subsidy to homeowners that put in IAs. They've only had 2 people participate, and the money's limited. I don't know what they intend to do once it's gone. But enough said, too much said.
Thank you. I really appreciate those, and at least 2 of them I totally agree with, and it was my error not to include them. One is absolutely there has to be a max. And I would personally add, I don't think it should ever include landscaping, because the sky's the limit there. And it also should be a percent less than 100%, so the homeowner has skin in the game, so there's motivation to get, say, to save them money and the town money by, for instance, getting a UD instead of an IA. If there's a 100% subsidy, it's a no-brainer. From most people. Once you have a realistic percent skin in the game, then it becomes a complex choice. So thank you, I agree with that.
So my view is based on, we have a pre-existing model, 70-30 split. If you look at the cost in this table of an IA, traditional IA versus sewers, they're about the same. If my next door neighbor was on the sewer and had to pay 70% in form of betterment and 30% was subsidized, I'd be really pissed if I didn't get the same deal. So I think that kind of sets whether it's,
That sets the minimum.
I think that sets the maximum
Well-
and the minimum.
Because he'd be annoyed if it went the other way.
Yeah.
But there's
But
a,
he's getting the ability to add bedrooms.
Well, why do you think-
Stop
why
for
do- wait,
one
wait,
second.
I will not-
Stop for
yeah.
1 second. You keep making the statement about adding bedrooms. There is a flow-neutral bylaw that applies whenever we get SRF funding for any of these projects. And the way that's been worked out, Amy, correct me when I get it wrong, that it's not you can add more bedrooms. That every homeowner has the right to have have at least 3 bedrooms. If you already have 3 bedrooms, you can't add more.
Might be 4. I think it's
It's
4.
It was changed to 4.
Whatever it was. So you
Right,
can, but it's
that's-
not, but you have to be careful, because it sounds like you can add as many bedrooms as you want. It's-
Right,
it's
I
constrained.
misspoke, right.
It's
But it's
constrained.
still a benefit.
constrained.
It's
Yeah.
a clearly
Right,
benefit that you
but
do
Steve,
not get.
why are you
IA.
assuming that if I have a well-functioning IA system, I couldn't possibly add an extra bedroom?
We're talking on the sewer side only.
No, I'm not talking on the sewer side
No,
only.
because the IA is an increment from a Title V.
Right, but I may not have maxed out my house for Title V. I may have 2 bedrooms and I'm.
But then it doesn't matter what you have
If
the
you have
IA.
the space, if you have the space in the land and you're doing an IA, the way the Board of Health rules are set up right now, you would just have to show that you can accommodate the flow from the extra bedrooms, okay? But on the sewer side, there is, because it's SRF funded, there's a limitation on the number of bedrooms.
Right, so it's not clear to me then that there's any particular advantage to being on the sewer versus being on.
In the Little Pond area, and this was very controversial, there were a lot of people who thought it was bad because it made Falmouth more developed. But the
Right.
individual property owners, to whom it affected, thought it was great. They could put on, in some cases,
No,
an
I've
extra
seen
bedroom
many,
that they
I've
could
seen
not
many of
put on.
those homes get enlarged
Right,
as a result.
right.
That's true. That's fair. I mean, that's fair, but I think that's hard to quantify. Whereas it's very straightforward. The subsidy versus what you pay. And then there's some difficult to quantify because not everyone necessarily takes advantage of that betterment capacity or really has the room on their lot or, to do it, or, I mean, there's just lots of things that come into that. FEMA regulations in the flood zone, et cetera.
Steve, can I make a?
Yep, hold on, I just want to be sure he's done.
Yeah, I think he's done, but Ken, you're ignoring the fact that the state has already provided a 50% betterment for IAs that sewers don't get.
Well, okay, if that's.
So, I mean, that's a big deal.
60%.
I mean, I'm ballparking that
60,
because
being clear, 60%.
I will tell you
The
that
state
when,
tax credit has a limit.
60%.
it's $18,000 over 3 years. That's,
Yeah, but if your system
For
costs you
many
100,000,
people-
you're not gonna get,
Right.
right, but the point is, it's out there. And the thing is the other thing, at the Cape Coastal Conference, the guys from DEP put out a request for quotes for identical IAs to 5 installers, 5 providers. Everybody in the room is seated, right? The range was $27,000 to $82,000 for the same system, identical system, all to, quote, qualified installers. And he said the message here is get at least 2 quotes, no matter what you do. But I was amazed at that range.
Right, but that's a different issue.
No, but the point is the state.
So that's where the maximum, which
That's
I
where the
think
maximum
is a good idea, to cap
Right.
it in some way. That's a good idea. Your point is well taken about all other forms of assistance in getting. So my bottom line is, I just don't want 2 people living next to each other to feel one got a better deal than the one next door because
Right,
he
absolutely.
was mandated to have an IA and the other one was mandated to hook to the sewer.
Right,
So
and
whatever we structure, or whatever is structured, needs to be fair with that concept.
But I was thinking your thing might be flipped, where the guy that was forced to get the sewer and only had a third of it paid for.
Yeah.
And has his next door neighbor getting half of it paid
Well,
for.
if he's paying 82,000 and he can only get 18,000.
Right, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the numbers are all over the place, but I think we really have to keep that in mind. And for a variety of reasons, the state has set up IAs for very special treatment going
So there
forward.
could be
That
a
could
formula
change.
developed where you look at the subsidy as any difference between a 30% reimbursement and what your state assistance comes to. You could develop something
Sure.
like that.
Let me just interrupt. These are all fantastic ideas, and I apologize for not thinking of them. this is so complex that I think at some point, either as we go along or at the end, we should take each individual thing, like a maximum, probably everybody would agree on that. A percent, and then a maximum percent or a minimum percent, and then put this together as a list to give to the management, the select board, but.
But what is the goal? Is the goal to establish equivalency?
Go ahead.
Between the different costs of these different systems? Is that what we're trying to do, so that the two neighbors in your example don't have a discussion and find out one paid a lot less than the other? And are we trying to do that, to establish that with this percentage, or equate to a tax cut with a subsidy, or?
No, let me try this. So the question came back, should there be a subsidy? Okay? We've worked our way down into fairness and all these other little numbers. The first and foremost question is, does this committee feel that if somebody is inside a geo zone mandated to put in an IA, should they get some form of subsidy? That's the first and primary question.
Yes.
Okay? My sense of the conversation is, we would like to say yes. Okay? I'm not asking for motion or anything yet. Then the question then becomes, how do you structure the details of such a subsidy? And then how do we go to the town's finance director to say, we think the program's going to cost the town this much money each year? So that's the
And
big
so,
picture. of it.
Steve, the other rationale for subsidy for the 70-30 split probably, obviously there's a lot of benefit to the homeowner, but there's some general benefit to the community as a whole for cleaning up these systems. And that's kind of where you can say we ought to be helping people do it.
I'm going to pass it back to Jonathan, because he was
Wait,
trying to
wait,
no, I'm going to
wait,
pass it back to
wait,
Jonathan, because he was trying to make a point.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing is that there's already a tax incentive that you're going to get. To me, that's sort of a subsidy, right? They're getting some of the costs
Absolutely.
offset.
Yes.
So that's already defined. That
So-
exists.
should be
but-
taken into
But
account.
to clarify this, the person who's the homeowner in a sewer district, town subsidizing the pipe in front of the house. The connection from the pipe to the house,
I know.
you can
It's your
access that same tax credit for that component, okay? So there's several different layers of what you can get or not get. Not everybody has enough income to get the $16,000. You know, if you're retired and whatnot, you're probably unlikely to be able to get $16,000 over 4 or 5 years. Maybe you get 6 or 7.
And in that case, does the subsidy kick in to help offset that cost? So they're getting, again, some sort of equivalent benefit, and the burden is not more to them compared to a sewer system.
Right. And that tax credit, as I understand it, applies to IAs too.
Well, that's what I was talking about for the
Yeah,
IA.
well, and to the connection part of the sewer.
You don't connect an IA to the sewer.
No,
The connection part of the sewer.
Someone that gets.
In the
it.
case of the sewer, it's the connection
done first.
It's already covering the connection to the sewer. The way it's written, the basic
The
fundamental,
tax-
the fundamental says, if you get told that your on-site system is no longer functional, you can access the tax credit for for a portion of your actual on-site costs, okay?
Right.
If you get told that you can no longer use your septic system, you have to connect to the sewer, you can access it for your component on your property. We say that's a geo boundary, and you shall put an IA in, that's all on your property now. It's all your cost on your property.
So the tax credit applies to it,
Correct,
right?
correct.
So-
There's almost like, if I may, I know, John, you haven't had a turn yet, but while the thought, before I lose it, there's almost 2 tiers to this. There is, call it the automatic state subsidy via a tax credit, except you may not be eligible if you don't have enough income, as Steve just said. But that's a given. Septic upgrade, I don't know if they've officially approved if you go to an IA is eligible if your system has not failed, or if you are mandated, will you then be eligible for that? I think they're talking about.
If the Board of Health says, you can no longer operate the septic system you have, you must do something, you qualify.
That's a failure then, and whether it's
That-
working or not, you gotta go to an IA because of John's
because it
mandate.
fails
Board
to
of Health
meet the
mandate.
new
It
reg.
fails to meet the current requirements.
So there's already a significant
Right.
subsidy for that work on your site. Subsidy does not pertain to, if you're mandated to sewer, to your sewer your sewer main that goes by your property. That's a town mandated and subsidized at 30%. So it almost seems to me, okay, you get a subsidy that's already a given because it's a state tax credit, and now we're considering that other piece, the town subsidy, to equalize, make equity for the fact that the town pays 30% of that sewer main. Should the town do something similar to someone who is mandated to put in an IA? I think that's the crux
the
of where
question.
we're heading.
So I'm going to go to John.
Yes.
So
Sorry.
2 points. There is no universal betterment. The betterment in Little Pond is different than the betterment at New Silver Beach. So the idea that your neighbor may pay more, that's not a reasonable argument, because you've been doing that for years. There's a 30-70 split in both places, but the cost was very different. The second point is that I would argue, by analogy to Little Pond, where the town provided all the low-pressure pumps to those people and bought them. The advantage to the town was that we bought one type of pump, and we could then service it. I would argue that when we get to IAs, if we're talking about a subsidy, what we should be doing is buying the box from John Smith, and everybody in that geo-boundary uses the same box, so that when we go to service it, we're servicing the same thing. And those are the 2 points.
I'd like to, I'm going to try to wrap this conversation up a little bit if I can.
John never got to finish, I think.
Did you finish, John?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. John, you want to be John or Jonathan?
John's good.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to wrap this discussion up if I can. But Steve, you've kind of like the point on this a little bit. Why don't you try to absorb this and maybe stepwise come back to the next meeting to say, we should consider taking this position, even if it's people with IAs are entitled to a subsidy. Okay, maybe not the number, but maybe.
Try to come up with something that
Try to work.
that meets what I
Try to
just
come up
heard.
with some stuff that we can start making some form of a recommendation relative to subsidies to the town governing body and their finance folks to get it going. Amy. We're now going to hear from Amy Lowell, the world-famous water.
I just had one thought, which is John Waterbury has suggested that the town consider buying the equipment. And there is an additional advantage of that, which is that you get a lower price for the equipment if you buy in bulk. So not only, that's a way of giving the subsidy, but also reducing the cost.
I would say that when it comes time, we'd have to set some performance criteria. And much like we did, put it out to bid and get a low bid vendor who wants to furnish, 500 or whatever units a year. Go ahead, Tom.
And I'll try, and maybe in a sense of kind of wrapping this up, and I wanted to apologize for the last column on there. I threw that onto Steve's spreadsheet in a big rush on Monday, just because I wanted to have that point, be a point of discussion in this thing, and you don't need subsidies or whatever. And Kristen immediately chastised me and said, well, you didn't do a very good job. I said, no, it was a big rush, and she's always yelling on Mondays, if you're going to get something in, you better do it now. And I didn't include anything in that column for urine disposal, but I really still want us to move towards a situation where we can somehow get the state to think of urine diversion as an option, as a type of IA or whatever you want to call it. And I wanted to make the point here that it's very, very low cost to pull this off. And I just put in 0 to 100, because somebody may do it without any equipment, and somebody may go and buy one QB. But anyway, I just wanted to apologize for the group for throwing that on. It's not refined at all. And anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to just touch on the QB thing, okay, momentarily. I brought this up a couple other times. we need to, as a board, be very careful around the QB phenomenon. A number of people have what they call their outdoor shower. Okay?
Yes.
They're illegal, because unless it's tied into the Title V septic system on your property, it's an illegal plumbing fixture, okay? You know, if brought a plan into the Board of Health and it said outdoor shower, the Board of Health will make you rewrite it as a rinse station, okay? So I'm not saying that people shouldn't use cubies or can't use cubies. That's their personal decision. But we need to be very careful as a board. They're not approved by the plumbing board, they're not approved by Title V,
I'm-
and they're an outlier to this group. And I think if people are using a cubie, that's their personal choice, but it'll be extremely difficult to ever get credit for people using cubies towards meeting any of our goals. That being said, I'm just pointing that
There are
out.
ways to get that credit. We brought it up a couple times already.
I'm not stopping anybody from trying for that, but right now, that's more of a long shot than anything else.
But I just put that out
Yeah.
to come up with that under $100 compliance
Right.
thing. You could get one QB, but I have never personally endorsed QBs.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna say right now, if we wind up defining geo-boundaries
Right.
and say that you shall put an IA in there, and urine diversion systems get approved by the state, if somebody says, I wanna use cubies, I don't believe that they're gonna be acceptable as compliant inside the geo-boundary at this time,
Steve?
okay?
I would say the monitoring would find out right away, because that's proof in the pudding, so
Yeah,
to speak.
So,
Anyway, let's move on. I just wanted to wrap things
I
up.
oftentimes try to distinguish between principles and rules. The principle of diverting your urine and doing something else with it is a decent principle. The rules on using a cubie are gonna be tough.
Yes,
Okay.
I don't doubt that, but
Okay.
I just want that option to be considered.
Kim Comart and I were on a Zoom-type meeting with the Urine Diversion Liaison Group and untold numbers of people from DEP. QBs are not going to fly.
Stay indoors.
Good.
Urine diversion may,
I don't know,
but
good
not
or bad,
cubies.
but I'm just right now, this board needs to be very careful about supporting or advocating the use of cubies, because they're just not accepted by the state, unfortunately.
Steve, can I just add one thing? Because Amy brought up an interesting, and John, point about should we go to a supplier to basically make uniform the source for these IAs? On the one hand, I can see the appeal for that, but it also makes me a little nervous, because what happens if in a year there's a better technology, or
You can bid, every year you can rebid the furnishing of the units.
okay, as long as there's an element of competition that remains in the mix.
We're not gonna do every geo-boundary the same year. As we move from year to year and the technologies change, you take advantage.
Or you could, I mean, the other thing that occurred to me, you could have a list. Here are 3 that we are, willing to purchase for use on your property. Because again, maybe different sizes, different plumbing arrangements.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up to the thousands of people that showed up for today's meeting, fought their way through the street fair. If there's anybody who wants to add comments to the subsidy at this time. All right, if not, we'll move on to item 2.
All right.
Last time around, we did a little bit of a lengthy presentation on McGansett, so that everybody on this board would understand a little bit of the analysis behind looking at the extent of a geo-boundary. Today, we're gonna look at Fiddler's Cove and Rand's Canal. Kristen, next up is going to be, is West Falmouth next,
Maybe,
or Quistit?
maybe both of them together.
Maybe both of them, yeah.
We'll see.
So, yep, but I'm just, the progress-wise, we're gonna, after we see these two, we're gonna be seeing West Falmouth and North Crissett in the next meeting, or both of them, okay?
Kristen Rathjen, Science Wares. So, as Steve said, today we're looking at fiddlers and rands. So, I followed the same methodology that I used for Megansett. So I'm not going to necessarily go through in as much detail, but you can stop me as we go through. So both fiddlers and rands are highlighted in the blue on there. Starting with fiddlers, MEP defines it as an artificial open water embayment. It's man-made. It empties into Megansett. It has a little over 200 parcels in there. According to the assessor's data, since the finalization of the MEP, there are 17 parcels that are listed as year built since 2013. There is a freshwater surface trout pond, and that has a 50% attenuation rate and a 27% outflow into Fiddler's Cove. So that gets taken into consideration as well. The Buzzards Bay Coalition Health Index score for Fiddler's Cove is 60%. One thing to note for Fiddler's Cove, where the MEP defines the monitoring station, that spot is not actually monitored. So I use the same data sources, the MEP, TMDL, Buzzards Bay Coalition, and the Cape Cod Commission. These are the MEP numbers. MEP said all the nitrogen removal needed to come from the upper sub-embayment, 352 kilograms, and the build-out number. Cape Cod Commission's planning tool says 355 kilograms, so they agree. This is just a snapshot of some of the data from Buzzards Bay Coalition. This is the long-term monitoring station. Again, it's not the Sentinel station, but this is the station that the MEP data used. So you can see there has been, it's pretty stable with their overall health index, and as well as total nitrogen. Total nitrogen looks actually a little less present day versus early 2000s. Looking at the water use number, again, looking at the more conservative one to determine what the nitrogen removal potential for an upgraded system would be, we would use the MEP average water use for a single family, so 192 gallons per day versus MVP, which says 233. So that comes out to 91 single-family homes that would need to be upgraded to 10 milligrams per liter. Again, Cape Cod Commission agrees. It's there so that nobody asks what the numbers look like. So this is the proposed IA district. So there are 104 parcels in here. There are 88 single-family homes. So the water use calculation said 91. You've got a commercial parcel in there, some other development. There is an existing IA right here. And there are some IAs back here. This portion here, this is Trout Pond. Again, that had a 50% attenuation and a 27% outflow. So upgrades in here really don't do much for Fiddler's Cove. They probably help Trout Pond, but for Fiddler's Cove, it's not much.
Where is Trout Pond?
Trout Pond is actually under this parcel because there's a house here, so it's kind of included there. But it's right under where my pointer is.
Okay.
No, at the North Falmouth Library, if you go to the North Falmouth Library, there's a pond right behind it.
And that might be the North Falmouth Library building that's there.
No, you're talking about two different, no.
Yeah, that's Cedar Lake, you're right.
Yeah, Cedar Lake is over
Yeah,
there.
that's
Trout
up here.
Pond is a little tiny, barely wet pond.
Right,
At the corner of Fiddler's Cove Road or whatever it's
yeah,
called.
it's right here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
right
sorry,
where she is
sorry.
now.
So when you say it's filled land,
No.
No, it's just,
No,
it's
It's just
show on
because of the
map.
way the parcel is defined.
It's a year-round.
oh, it's a real pond?
It's a
just
real
not on
pond.
the map, okay.
Right, it's because I highlighted the parcel and that
Got it,
blocked
got it,
everything
okay,
under it.
okay.
No, there's water there. So that's just a close-up view. If you look at the MVP water use, they say it's 504 kilograms if you do the same calculations. When you do it with the conservative MEP number, it comes out to 314. The present target was only 250 something. So on both accounts, you would be meeting the TMDL and there would be some buffer space in there. Not included in the calculations would be the fertilizer and stormwater credits. That would come out to there. So the proposed district that had a little over 100 parcels was 51% of the parcels in the watershed for Fiddler's Cove. Does anyone have any questions on Fiddler's Cove
No,
before I move?
again, Bill, to make the point you made last time, you did all of your analysis presuming that the state's target of 10 milligram per liter functioning IEA systems is
Correct.
achieved. And to the extent that we don't get to that number, this boundary over time might get bigger.
Correct. And for the existing IAs, either in the district or in the watershed, I'm using 19. So regardless of what their actual performance is.
So if they were 10, you would only need half as many houses?
No,
This
that
is
is
with
at
10.
10. Right now,
This
right
is
now the
with
approved
10.
systems are 19. If she
Oh, I'm
looked
sorry, I
at,
thought she said she used 19.
I use 19 for this,
House.
for this house here and these back here, because those are systems that were put in that are old systems.
functioning at 19.
Oh, okay.
Right. Did you have a
Kristen?
comment? Okay.
Question. Now, that's the portion that would get us to our TMDL. What is the total number of houses in that watershed? Should it become a default to the state mandate that says everybody's got to do it?
So there are
do all three.
203 parcels. How many of them are developed? I don't have that on here. There are 150 single-family homes within that watershed. So you have 53 parcels that are something other than single-family home. So this area represents 51% of all the parcels.
Okay.
But Ed, you've used this phrase a couple times, that the state's going to mandate that everybody put an IA in. I
Yep.
don't believe that to be true. The state has said we have to develop a watershed plan.
Right.
That shows how we're going to achieve it.
Right.
And that if we don't do a watershed plan, then there's a fallback that says people have to start doing this. So this is a plan.
Right.
That we
That-
fold into the watershed that says,
Yeah.
this is an area, put IAs in, we make our
My,
targets.
my reason for asking this and emphasizing the comparison is, at some point, we've got to sell this to the town taxpayers.
Yeah.
And, hey, taxpayers, yeah, this is a pretty good bite, and maybe we're recommending a subsidy that's going to cost you a couple of million a year, but if it doesn't happen, here is what it would go to for more people. And I think that's going to be an important marketing tool, if I can use that phrase, as we try to convince people of the merit of this approach.
If you also think back to the original Title V regs, was that if the town did not adopt watershed permit and choose to go that route, every parcel would have had to upgrade within 5 years. So,
We've made the decision to do watershed
Correct.
permits.
Two unrelated questions. One, how about, what do people think about on unbuilt lots in the upper watershed that are not required, that if you build, you have to?
Set
a system
set
in
that
there.
one aside. Let's just stay on the.
right, that's the
geo-boundaries
growth
for now.
conversation.
Okay, all right, then, just on the geo-boundaries, I think you said earlier that some calculations showed you needed 91 houses, but you chose to do 88.
So, because there's an average, the MEP they used individual parcel water use, and they also had an average water use for single-family residents, because that's what each watershed's primarily made up of. To make these calculations, these present-day calculations, as relatable as possible back into the MEP model, I'm using the MEP average water use, because it's really hard to take into consideration how land use may have changed since the time of the MEP. And you're getting different values depending what data set you're using for average water use. So if we use the MVP numbers, they're saying there's a higher flow. If I calculate how much nitrogen would be removed, that's not equivalent to what the MEP used to calculate how much nitrogen got loaded. So that's the difference. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And what about the houses that you said are already attenuated 50% by trout pollen?
So these ones here, I take when I put the IA in with the average water use, I cut that 50%, and then because it's only a
You count them as
27,
half a house.
and then it's only 20% outflow, so I cut it again.
Which is good.
Good.
Okay, so that was Fiddler's Cove. Rand's Canal, this is the image from the Cape Cod Commission. This is another watershed where they don't both agree for all of the sub-embayments. So Rand's Canal has the northern fork, which is up here, the southern fork, which has a lot of little sub-watersheds in it, and then the inlet, which is this little tiny section right here. Also man-made, also discharges in, also empties into Megansett. So there's 449 parcels in there, 280 are single-family. 10 parcels have been listed as year-built since the finalization of the MEP. So Rand's Canal, the different portions have several freshwater bodies. Trout Pond, so the remaining 73% from Trout Pond dumps into Rand's Canal. Flax Pond, which has a 10% attenuation but 100% outflow. And then Cedar Lake, which has a 20% attenuation and a 54% outflow. So all of that gets accounted for when the parcels are in those individual sub-watersheds. Excuse me. Buzzards Bay Coalition says the health index score for Rand's Canal South is 45%. So Buzzards Bay Coalition monitors in the south, that's not a good map. In the South Fork, very close to where the MEP says the Sentinel Station is, there's not actually monitoring in the North Fork. This is the snapshot from the station that's closest to what the MEP Sentinel Station is. So they're showing a large decline. This is the total nitrogen from the station. The Sentinel Station there, the target threshold concentration is actually 0.5. So there are other factors that are driving the health status of Rand's Canal. MEP numbers, the present numbers are 607, nothing from the inlet. The Cape Cod Commission says 894, and they have almost twice as much that they're saying needs to come from the Southern Fork. So we'll look at the North Fork first and the inlet. The MEP, 246 kilograms, so that's 79 single-family residents. For this, the MVP water use number is actually less, so to be more conservative, I did the calculations with that, yes.
Why do they say water consumption is only 3/4 of what it is in Fiddler's Cove per household? Do you know?
Because people water their lawns differently and wash their boats
But I mean,
differently.
they have data that.
Yeah, they have lot data, they have
Yep.
individual
Okay, 'cause
parcels.
that's the thing that stood out to me, is
Yep.
this was only 3/4 of the Fiddler's Cove number.
And it goes back to the seasonality of the watersheds.
Yep.
It goes back to a lot of things. But again, to make these calculations fit as accurately as possible into the MEP model, trying to do it the same way. So this is the proposed district for the North Fork. It's 146 parcels. So here I said 79. That's because most of it is Cedar Lake. And Cedar Lake has 20% attenuation, and it's not 100% outflow. So a lot more work has to be done up here because of Cedar Lake. The inlet, there are a couple homes up here. This is one existing IA that I'm really not sure where it actually discharges into. So that's the proposed district for there.
Just, you can now see Trout Pond on this map.
Yeah, Trout Pond's down
It's in the
here.
lower right, no.
Oh,
no,
Trout Pond's
there,
down here.
That one right there,
Yep.
that's Trout Pond.
So it's not, it's an actual water body.
Yeah, oh, it's there year-round. It's a wet mess.
So if I use the MVP parcel use number for all of the individual parcels and not an average, they say 361 kilograms. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at it as average water use for all the single-family residents in the watershed, and then the actual water use for those specific parcels. So it meets both MEP and MVP present load reductions, and there is a little bit of buffer there. So the conservative estimate was 261, and then using the other ones, it was 361. There's the one IA at the inlet, the fertilizer and stormwater credits for the North Fork are 53 kilograms, and then the proposed shellfish area was about 33. So it's not close to the build-out. The build-out for here was 571, if that was what you wanted to target as far as your geo boundary. Just putting that out there so that it's there. For the North Fork, all of the developable lots that are in that watershed are within that district. Okay. One thing I threw in here was a consideration of, well, could you put a PRB and could that reduce the number of IAs? So there are two potential locations, and this wasn't even a thorough desktop evaluation. I was looking at locations where you have basically crossed sub-watershed, perpendicular to it, where you have enough load coming from behind it that it would make it cost-effective enough. So using numbers that have come from Isotech for different considerations for PRB and Orleans numbers, applying it kind of roughly on a linear foot, for a portion here, either be it the bike path or Old Main Road. Looking at a 2,200-foot PRB could be around 6.2 million, and that would include your monitoring costs as well as a re-injection. Versus there were 140 parcels back here in the district. If every one of them was 45,000, that would come out to 6.3 million. So that could be something that could warrant a formal evaluation, whether that would be a feasible
Or
option.
you could say the difference is 1/10,000,000, which is 100,000.
Right.
Which is peanuts in terms of the engineering and the unknowns of the PRB, and the fact that you have two different technologies instead of one.
Right. So then, move on to south, unless anyone has anything for north.
Oh, yeah,
Go ahead.
several slides back, you had a slide that showed the earlier than that, and the build-out is more than 4 times the present load. Where is all that unbuilt-out land?
So there's a couple of big parcels, and there's some up here, but since the time of the MEP, some of those have gone to conservation. So when the build-out numbers were determined, MEP sat there and looked at how the land use was marked at that time. So things could have changed. And that's how they determined it. So if you have a 40-acre parcel and you can do one single-family unit per acre, you could have had 40 homes on there. It doesn't take into consideration 40B.
I guess I'm thinking if 3/4 of it hasn't been built out, then I know Steve doesn't want to talk about this
No,
at
she's
this
back, no,
point.
she's back to the MEP. Keep in mind, the MEP was done years ago.
Okay.
There's been development since
If
then.
after you correct for any mistakes in the number, if it was still a big ratio, then it seems to me you'd have to talk about the relevance of a requirement on new buildings.
Once we define the geo-boundaries, if they're inside the geo-boundary, they've got to follow. So that would be new building or existing.
No, but let's say you
Right,
was
you're talking
highly
about
built up
growth outside the boundary.
downstream, near the, as it usually is. And there was a big area upstream that isn't built out.
Is it in the geo-boundary?
I haven't defined the geo-boundary yet.
Well, we got a map up here trying to define the geo-boundary.
Okay, let's suppose that you've picked the number of lots to make that geo-boundary based on the build-out. That's created the size of this. If you didn't have the build-out, the geo-boundary would be much smaller.
If I chose based on build-out, it would be essentially the entire watershed. Because that's what the whole build-out encompassed. The entire, what was the growth potential of the entire watershed? So, for this is, forget what percent. Oh, so this is 213 parcels. The whole watershed itself is only about 450 parcels of the whole Rand's north and south. So this alone is over 50% of the watershed.
Of built parcels or of parcels?
Parcels.
Including vacant lots?
The vacant lots in the geozone have these dots on them. These are where the vacant lots in the geozone are.
Okay, I'll talk to you afterwards. I don't want to
Okay.
take up the committee's time.
Okay. So the south, that's basically what is feeding into the southern fork. So MEP says 361, so that would be 105 single-family residents using the same water use numbers because we're in the same watershed. This is what the southern looks like. It's 187 parcels within there. These guys all have existing IAs back here. So this kind of goes to Steve's point. This is that big lot that has now turned into mostly conservation with the potential for some affordable housing. But if it was completely developed out, that's where a huge portion of the load, the build-out load for the southern fork would be coming from. Using the actual water use numbers for these parcels, MVP says 466 kilograms a year. So with this geo-boundary, it only addresses the MEP present load, and the MEP present load is the same as the state mandated TMDL. So that's the regulatory target. It doesn't meet the MVP load. Remember, the MVP was 600 something, so this is only 2/3 of that. Again, I took into consideration the attenuation and outflow for both Flax Pond and Trout Pond. You have similar stormwater and fertilizer credits and shellfish. And again, this is what the build-out looks like. The build-out for the southern was 2,000. Again, for this, it wasn't all of the developable lots, but the majority of them are within the proposed IA district. So back to the PRB, you could potentially, if you did a PRB in the north part, you could carry it down on either side, depending. So that could be a possibility to look at as well. So for both Rand's north and south, for both those geozones, it's 89% of the entire watershed, of the parcels in the watershed, to get to the present nitrogen load requirement with some buffer space. Then to just pull together what I just put together for Fiddlers and Rands and what we talked about last week for Megansett, this is what the geo-boundaries look like for those three watersheds. It's 648 parcels.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Very nice.
I would like to, at this moment in time, just sort of jump up to item 5, reports of members and staff briefly, because Amy, you have to leave in in 10 or so minutes. Is there anything that you want to provide or say relative to any of the outfall work that's going or whatnot? I mean, quick summary?
I don't have anything prepared, but the water quality sampling is underway.
Thank you.
The benthic sampling is underway. And the eelgrass sampling will start in the next week or so. Not sampling, eelgrass survey will start in the next week or so. And we've continued to have very frequent meetings with a wide variety of regulators about all of the various permits. We're most recently talking about the anti-degradation requirements under the NPDES permitting.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes.
So NPDES permits, the NPDES permit regulations say that the project needs to be reviewed to see if it will degrade the environment. And the way they judge that is they say, here's the current concentration, or the current concentration within the watershed. Here's its threshold concentration, which is the problem. I'll give you a heads up that that's the issue. Here's its threshold concentration, and the difference between those is the assimilative capacity of the watershed, or of the water body, excuse me. And if you're not going to take up more than 10% of that assimilative capacity, then theoretically that's not going to degrade, that's not going to degrade the watershed, and you're okay. If you come to the conclusion that it is going to take up more than 10% of that amount, then you need to go through, it's not a no, but it's a additional criteria. The thing is that there's been very few anti-degradation reviews, and there is not a threshold number for Nantucket Sound. So the conclusion that we are coming to, as we have with a lot of these things, is that the town needs to develop its own anti-degradation proposal, anti-degradation evaluation, and provide that to the state. The state it's very challenging for the state to say in this circumstance how that evaluation really is going to get done. So we are going to propose an evaluation and seek their review of it.
Given that the volume of flow that goes out the outfall is so small compared to the total volume of flow.
Yeah, I'm not saying you can't justify
in
it.
Nantucket Sound, it's more of an exercise of saying, look at all of this stuff. We don't think we're degrading anything out here inside the boundaries, but we still have to do all the work and present.
Sure.
Rachel Jakuba from the Buzzards Bay Coalition attended our last meeting with the regulators on this subject, and she was importantly making the point that, making very well the point that overall this is a water quality improvement project, and we are taking away septic load, and so the anti-degradation evaluation needs to take into account the load that is removed, not just the load that is added. So that's one of the ways in which we will be making our own plan for our own anti-degradation evaluation that takes all these factors into account and sort of charts them a path for how this can be reviewed. We do have an example anti-degradation evaluation that was done for Taunton for an increase in flow. So it's nice to have an example, but there are not a lot out there. Particularly not, there's not a lot of examples of, there's no examples of new marine outfalls. The evaluations are all for increases in flows.
Thank you, Amy.
Can I just repeat one of my favorite statistics? Your annual outflow is equal to what the tide goes through Nantucket Sound every 10 seconds.
Correct. It's very small.
Can I make a minor point here? We're talking about Vineyard Sound, not Nantucket Sound.
It's actually Nantucket Sound.
No, if you go to the formal geo-boundaries of the U.S. government.
We've spent a lot of time on this already.
I have too.
Okay,
I've had
we're not
arguments.
going to resolve it tonight. We have decided to call it, we decided it's Nantucket Sound. We can have further
I
discussions about
tried
it.
to do that too.
In order to keep the Army Corps of Engineers happy, we're using their definition of where
call it the
Nantucket Sound
Sound.
is. Huh?
If you just call it the Sound,
They use a corner of New Seabury as the northeastern boundary of Vineyard Sound, probably under pressure from the vineyard. But that's the way it's officially spelled out, according to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names.
Don't hit them.
Can you load this up for me?
Could I just ask a question of Kristen?
Absolutely.
So, we're talking about the IA mandates here, but is the tool taking into account the footprint required to accommodate, let's say, a typical IA system? We had the discussion of about 2,000 square feet plus or minus. All these parcels that are shown in there, able to, with our current technology, best guess from satellite imagery, whatever, accommodate these systems?
So I did do an evaluation where we did some rough lot sizes, and I have mapped out areas where the lots might not be big enough. So I do have that as a GIS layer in there. When you look at Fiddler's Cove, you can see that there's already an IA on some of the lots. So it is a consideration that needs to be
Can we
made.
build a buffer, additional lots that need to be included to, let's say, accommodate those that will have a difficult time incorporating an IA onto their current lot?
You wanted to say something?
No, did you get this in here?
No, what do you want?
Well, it's under
Okay.
DCIM, in the store and go. You bring up a good point, which the geo boundaries we've done haven't added in the other factors like how tight are some of these lots. So there's a wide range for what it costs to put an IA in. If you've got more room, I mean, when I was sitting on the Board of Health and we were looking at the Mara Vista Peninsula, we came to the conclusion that if people had to go upgrade all of their Title V's and everything, that it would be a barren peninsula, because every tree would have to be cut down and systems would have to be built onto the lot line. So it's gonna be a challenge for some of these property owners to get there. All right, and I hit there we go. So, this is the next item on the agenda, just a quick summary of the Clean Water Symposium I went to back in June at Stony Brook University. It really was an academic, graduate and postgraduate research symposium. There's very little what I would call practical, applied, lessons learned stuff, so much as, people that are working in the labs or building field studies. There was introduction and opening remarks from the Suffolk County officials. First session was about mitigating nitrogen and phosphorus from on-site wastewater. Session 2 was remediation of nitrogen and phosphorus beyond the source. Then there was a keynote speech by Dr. Lisa Alvarez Cohen from the University of California, Berkeley. And session 3 was ending the forever of PFAS chemicals. So obviously session 3 is not something we've dealt with much here. Anyways, under the introduction and opening remarks, some good data from my perspective was picked up. There are approximately 400,000 on-site systems on all of Long Island. Suffolk County has 8 approved IA systems, and they're all approved at 19 milligrams per liter. There's approximately 5,000 IAs already installed in Suffolk County. I didn't put the number down here, but they're putting in between 200 and 400 a year at this point. In order to get an IA system approved in Suffolk County, you have to have 2 years worth of data, not 3, like we have here. And they found the influence strength is 60 to 80 milligrams per liter, consistent with what we've found going on. There are grants available for people converting to IA, back to the subsidy question, and they range from 10,000 to 20,000. I didn't get all the details on how they determine the size of the grant money made available, but it's funded by a sales tax levy that was passed through the legislature a few years back, in which they predict over the next 50 years, over a 50 years period, they expect to raise $3.1 billion to convert over the systems to IA. So that's again, another benchmark. Session 1 under the mitigating nitrogen and phosphorus from on-site wastewater. This is a little bit all over the map, but there was a guy who I was impressed by named Dr. Lee Blaney from the University of Maryland. I would consider him a phosphorus guru. He's developed and is scaling up a process that he calls PAIRS, and he's been working with the chicken farmers in Maryland, because there's a lot of chicken farms in Maryland, working on a way to convert chicken waste to fertilizer. And for those of you that take an interest in this, fundamentally he moves the pH to the 4 to 5 range to get the phosphate out of the waste. and then he raises the pH to 9 or a little bit higher to create struvite, and from that, he makes a fertilizer that, basically gives back to the, I think he said he had 3 farmers working with him at this point, and he's looking to recruit a few more. Then the other thing in that session 1 to take note of was a guy named Frank Russo and a guy named Saiwai Chen have developed and patented the Flexo biofilter. What did I just do? Nope. Anyways, in some ways it's similar to Smith's process, some variations on it, but they only have one so far, and it's on the Stony Brook campus, and they're in the 2nd year of operating it, and they indicate that they're consistently making 10 milligrams per liter or less. But they patented it, and they're looking at trying to scale it up and start getting it into a manufacturing process, so it's a plug-and-play unit, similar to what Smith and his backers are doing. They have I talked to them briefly, they have no plans at the present time to try to go through the mass system. In session 2, with the remediating nitrogen phosphorus beyond the source, the first speaker was Paul Dombrowski, who we know from Isotech. He did a presentation on PRBs and, the relative costs and success and what they learned, mostly from the stuff on the Cape here. He was followed by a guy named Niels Volkenborn, who is actually affiliated with Stony Brook. I think, Ken, you and I spoke with him on the phone one day. He has been working with some more practical aspects of PRB installations. He had some bulkhead concepts, some issues with it, but, there was some good information. And then the last person in the session was a guy named Dr. Mike Doal. He's also affiliated with Stony Brook. And he's been looking at sugar kelp. And he's been running a research at multiple locations around Long Island, some places with high nitrogen loads, some places with lower nitrogen loads, some places with shallower water, deeper water, et cetera, et cetera. And his pitch on this is that the growing season for sugar kelp is December to May. So there's potential to offset the oysters that don't grow December to May, raise sugar kelp in the winter season to get the nitrogen out because it needs the cold water. And one of the things he pointed out was that the sugar kelp removes roughly 1.8 times the nitrogen per acre when compared to what oysters remove. So, that his thing was to optimize nitrogen removal year round. He had a very, very mixed data set. He was getting results that didn't make sense for some of the areas was running these things in, and he clearly needs to do more study, and he's working on it. It's probably going to take a couple more years before he can start to pin it down a little bit. I actually caught up with Chuck Martinson. Chuck is aware of sugar kelp and what it can and can't do, and he's given some consideration to possibly do it, do a small-scale thing in a portion of the town's marina in the winter when the piers aren't in use, just to see what happens with growing sugar kelp.
Didn't we hear that in connection with oysters and with anything, that it doesn't matter so much what the nitrogen level is in the winter? Because it's not interfering with other things. I mean, I totally defer to the people on this committee that really understand this stuff. But like Ken and Tom.
Well, I think it matters less. But I wouldn't say it doesn't.
Not by a factor of 2.
I don't know.
I find that number, because I'm going to present the new numbers that we have for Eel River, and they're really good numbers, and I find it hard to believe, because first of all, the sugar kelp, and I'll be really quick, grows in an area where nitrogen content is already low, because you can't really do this inside in the embayments where the nitrogen content is already way up. So I don't know over what time frame. Is that only in 5 months or so?
You're saying we couldn't do it in the estuaries anyway?
Right, that's what I mean, you can't do it there, and that's where the nitrogen is. So that's the irony of the sugar kelp
So you
thing.
could clean up Vineyard Sound, which doesn't need to be cleaned up?
Exactly.
On Long Island, they are doing it in the shallow estuaries.
They are doing it, this was being done inside different estuaries and embayments, okay? And what I said, they had very much, at some locations, where it was higher nitrogen, they were growing lots of kelp. In other places where it was low nitrogen, they were getting conflicting
Yeah.
results from the sort of.
I'll try to
the
follow
model.
up on this and see.
Yep, that's why I'm letting you know. And then there was a keynote speech by Dr. Lisa Alvarez-Cohen from University of California, Berkeley. We started moving into a lot of what I would call the forever chemical question, PFOS, whatever. She was a very good speaker. She's been working for a long time, and her sort of expertise is finding different microbes that can break down a range of forever chemicals. And she has worked over the years on things, identifying and implementing different in situ systems that reduce PCBs in the groundwater, as well as MTBE, which was an additive to the gas that
Yep.
was very absorbent in the water, and people thought they weren't going to be able to get it out. But she's developed a number of things, and they're implementing them on different remediation sites. So she sort of said, like, is forever forever? Her whole thing was, is forever forever, or can we find a way to trick biology? Anyway, she talked about PFAS and PFOA. She said there's thousands of compounds apparently out there. And I won't, she put up pictures of like these different PFOA, PFAS. Is there like 4 fluoride rings or 8 fluoride rings, and what's hanging off each end? And she talked about working with different microbes to break off things on the end, finding certain microbes could take a 8 thing down to a 3, but couldn't get it down lower, have to put it into different microbes to get it down all the way. So very much ongoing research, but as she said, they're finding microbes that are working on addressing some of the stuff, but it's, the time frame for breaking anything down is not an hour, it's months or years to really break the stuff down. So the rest of the session 3 was a sort of series of researchers that basically reiterated what we just heard in the keynote speech. A lot of PFOS, a lot of tricks about trying to figure out how to break the bonds down, make them do things better. And then the last person was a woman named Courtney Davis, who was at the New York Department of Health. And she did a good description of the fact that, New York, much like the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, has wrestled with developing PFOS, PFAS regulations. And now the EPA's laid on a whole nother series of criteria and trying to find out how they all fit together and whether they need to update the regulations. So that was what I went to see. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Tom, are you next?
Yes, I'm headed up there.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
I guess I got away from home for a couple of days. All right. I really have not taken my own vacation.
Back in February, when I first took a first stab at figuring out what the economic value of the nitrogen, bioextraction is the new term. We always heard sequestered before, but you go in with the shellfish people, and now it's bioextraction. And this talk is going to go from some pretty refined, very good numbers to apples, oranges, and even grapes by the time we get through comparisons at the end. But what we have now is some good weight number. The project was a 4-year pilot project that started in 2020. And 2020 was blessed with something called COVID. So we had hundreds of thousands of oysters, but no market, because these oysters are restaurant oysters. These are half-shell oysters. So 300,000 were landfilled and born. A whole bunch of them were sold, I think, for like a nickel a piece to the Nature Conservancy for some South Coast projects. So that year doesn't count. So I took the 3 good years that do count and showed the average harvested weight. I'd like to get up and point at these, but I can't very conveniently. I don't have
You
a
can
pointer or
use the
anything.
mouse.
But
Use the mouse.
oh, the mouse? Well, I can't. Well, maybe I can see what I'm doing. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. And it's a black cursor, so it really shows up well. Anyway, this is the 3-year average harvest of acres, per acre. And each year it went up, not quite 30%, but each year consistently showed gain. Our guys are just getting better, I think, at growing the oysters. They figured out the system, so 35,000 kilograms per acre, and we have some real good numbers now on the actual nitrogen content by weight of the oysters. Before, I was using a generalized number, average of grams of nitrogen per individual oyster, and this number actually is somewhat lower than that number, but basically what the numbers tell us is that 35,000 kilograms of oysters represent 106 kilograms of nitrogen trapped in about 8 months over the growing season from May through the full thing. Now, they were sampled, and many of them were taken out early in the process too. Now, what's kind of interesting here is Falmouth's fraction of the allocation for the Eel River, which is a very small sub-watershed within Wacoit Bay. Our allocation is 3,210 kilograms per year, and this 106 accounts for 3% of that.
Is that kilograms nitrogen or
Total nitrogen.
So 3,200 kgN. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, the fraction of our nitrogen, right. So anyway, but the point is at 3.3%, this says that only 30 acres. I hope I didn't do that. But anyway, what this says is only 30 acres of oysters, which to me doesn't seem very big, could account for all of Falmouth's allocation for the Eel River, which again is a very small subwatershed of all of
How many
Wacoit.
acres is the Eel River?
I don't know. I don't know what
I
the
mean,
total
what-
area is.
Are you talking half of it, or a tenth of it, or 1% of it, or all of it?
Probably a tenth of it. I don't know. 300 acres is only half a square mile. And Eel River is, anyway, I don't know, but it's a very good number, Stephen. I'll try to figure it out. But what I was interested in looking at, because taking the nitrogen out after it's already in the estuary is sort of like putting a Band-Aid on somebody that's being injured, right, while you're trying to put Band-Aids on their wounds. The nitrogen's already in the estuary. It's already doing its bad stuff. So my thought was, let's go back and intercept that nitrogen before it gets into the groundwater and ultimately to the estuary. The Cape Cod Commission's model shows 4.5 kilograms of nitrogen per household per year. So this 106 kilograms of nitrogen represents the annual output from this typical Cape Cod household of 4.5 kilograms. So then, what does it cost if we want to go? What's the capital cost of trying to intercept that nitrogen? And the simplest thing I picked was urine diversion, and I'm going to say the forbidden word. If you bought a Cmte for $80, and that some people may not do that at all. They may have a completely separate system and not use a Cmte, but just as kind of a placeholder, I put in 24 houses at $80 would be $1,900 is what this acre of oysters represents. Now, remember, the acre of oysters is earning quite a bit of money, and I'm not privy to the financials of our growers. We have 3 growers under contract to us, but the system we have set up has been very rewarding to them because they get to grow the oysters for free after they each hit 282,000 oysters per plot. So we've really incentivized them to grow as many oysters as possible. Now, what if we put in septic systems in 24 houses at 35,000, and as I mentioned earlier at the Cape Coastal Conference, they cited numbers from $27,000 to $82,000 quotes they got, but I put in 35,000, so that's 830,000 that this acre of oysters represents in about 8 months of living there and pulling nitrogen out of the water column. And if we go to projects that have already been completed, Falmouth's Little Pond project, which we've already talked about a little bit today, that came in at just over $20,000 a household. So then those 24 households are worth almost $500,000 in avoided capital costs. In other words, if we had to put in infrastructure to capture the same amount of nitrogen that the oysters are capturing in 8 months. Now, if we go to proposed projects in Falmouth, the Great and Green Pond project, they're still in the planning stages. The numbers are all over the place, but numbers that have been in play range from $60 to $80 million. And it's to service 1,800 houses in Falmouth. And if you do those, it works out to, at the low end, at $33,000 per house, and at the high end, $44,000 per house. You're talking $750,000 to just over $1 million. Now, after this, it gets really crazy, right? Because I'm trying to compare apples, oranges, and it's at even grapes. Mashpee right now is in the midst of a very expensive project because they're having to build a treatment plant from scratch. Okay, they've allocated $162 million to provide service initially to, when this part of the project is completed, to 1,700 houses. That's a cost of $94,000 per house. And that works out to $2.25 million. Barnstable last year announced a 30-year project with a projected cost of $1.4 billion with a B. Now, you mentioned, was all of Suffolk County the 50-year plan for $2.3 billion? Was that the number you had from the conference, Steve? Do you remember?
I have to look at my slide again.
Yeah, anyway,
It
that
was-
stuck in my mind when you were presenting, and that's for a whole county, right?
That's for Long Island.
Wait a minute, for all of Long Island, that's two
Yeah,
counties?
Yeah. So we were in Suffolk County, but the.
Right, I know Suffolk.
The tax applies to, because on the western end of Long Island,
Right.
people are sewered in portions of Nassau County.
Right.
And all of Nassau County is not sewered.
Right.
So the tax covered IAs
Right.
on Long Island, not just Suffolk County.
But anyway, so Barnstable last year announced this 30-year, projected at $1.4 billion. I don't know what it's gonna cost 30 years from now, but it's not gonna be $1.4 billion. And that's initial project is supposed to be for 12,000 houses. And that works out to $117,000 per house. And suddenly our acre of oysters is trapping $2.75 million worth of nitrogen. So it's a kind of a crazy way to put a dollar value on oysters, but I'm doing it partly as an exercise to get people thinking about it. And what's going on is we try to clean up after ourselves.
Well, do those towns have places where they can put significant number of oysters?
No, we are very lucky. Mashpee, I don't know if you remember, 10 years ago, Mashpee was going to solve everything with shellfish. And it took them at least 5 years to get out of that mode. There have been several write-ups about it. They were going to, I don't know, you remember the stuff about it?
The details, but yeah.
The details, but yeah, and it's been a source of embarrassment. And when Ashley, the present resources director for the town, talks about it, which she did at the Cape Coastal Conference, with a little bit of embarrassment because some people were really fooled. They were pulled in with this idea that they weren't going to have to pay for a sewer. They weren't going to have to do a whole bunch of other infrastructural things. It could all be done with shellfish, and of course it didn't. And even here in Falmouth, it's not all going to be done with shellfish, I promise you. We're going to get a small fraction of the nitrogen out. But questions from anybody, or John?
I mean, what's the room for expansion? It seems like it's a good opportunity to get more nitrogen out of the system,
That's-
as long as it could be accommodated by the environment.
That's why I'm raising this issue. We would love to expand and expand dramatically. Right now, we only have 1.3 acres. It's 20,000 square foot plots. It's going to be a hard sell to the public. We're lucky that we have this site at Washburn's Island where the abutters are the National Estuarine Reserve. So we've got that problem solved. But if we go to Great Pond, which other than Wacoit Bay is the really big nitrogen removal project hanging over the town of Falmouth, the gear that works, and it works beautifully, is floating gear. First of all, people can see it. You can see it from shore. If they want to sail, it's in the way. The state mandates that you can't have floating gear over any commercially productive bottom. Do you want to guess what they consider commercially productive bottom?
Yeah, I'm going to take a more positive spin. You're kind of,
But anyway, it's 1 clam per square yard. That's considered commercially exploitable.
but,
So we've done massive surveys
right.
already in town, and the sites are out there. The Corps of Engineers won't let you cover more than 10% of the surface area of an estuary with floating gear, but the sites that are legally feasible for us based on DMF regulations are that black icky bottom, the deeper water where it's the black anoxic mud sort of situation. But this dollar value of the nitrogen is where I'm headed with this as a sales point to people in town to try to say Chuck has real over-the-top ambitions. We have to rein him in occasionally.
Well, he came and showed us maps. He figured all that out.
Right, we've got it all figured out about where the potential is. But the sales part of it is gonna be the tough part. Because it's got years of sampling and research and categorizing these different areas. They're very complete maps.
But by sales, you mean finding a market for that many oysters?
No, sales to the people to allow it to be done.
Put it there.
For instance, in Great Pond, I mean, it's a beautiful potential spot, but if you'd like to sail, there are people even that water ski in Great Pond. And these big, expansive floating beds of oysters are not going to go over well with them.
But just to help you, the whole program that he's referring to over here is considered to be like a pilot program from the Division of Marine Fisheries and everybody. Chuck Martinson, who was over inside the Department of Environmental, whatever they are.
MES,
Marine and Environmental.
Marine and
Marine
Environmental
Environmental Services.
It moved out sort of from this committee over to him, okay? He's an optimist, but he has gone before the selectmen and got the selectmen's buy-in to go to the next step, which is to go from, we have this pilot program, to then go and say, we've done all this mapping and we want to put these other areas out for lease, basically, okay? So
Yeah, we're gonna be asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars next year, town meeting,
Right,
to do more planning.
to get over the next
and-
hurdle with this.
Yeah,
But to date, it's been a successful program in the sense of getting it going, getting the Division of Marine Fisheries to agree to what we did in Little Pond.
Right.
And, going from having no oyster farmers
yeah.
to having 3 oyster farmers. And as Chuck says, he's got a whole bunch of people that if we made leases available, they'd sign up and go for them.
I think if the people who see these
Right.
numbers, maybe they'd be a little bit more educated on what the benefit is.
That's what he's hoping.
Well, that's my hope, but again, the problem is it's unpredictable. If we had a COVID year again, where our nitrogen bioextraction machine sort of coughs and skids to a halt. But there was something else I was going to say about his plans moving forward. But anyway, it's going to be a multi. Oh, that's what I wanted to say, is there's been major concerns about the tremendous success because last year we got 1.4 million animals out of the 3 plots, 1.4 million oysters that went to market and were sold. And the concern has been that it was going to flood the market. Every one of those oysters leaves Massachusetts. They're not even sold here. I've been in Florida and greeted with Washburn Island oysters in the restaurant that my son, and he had nothing to do with ordering. He said, Dad, they just showed up here from the purveyor. We were down, this was 2 years ago, they were already as far south as Florida, so.
The Clam Man does sell Washburn Island oysters now.
The Clam Man, oh, yeah, but his are not ours. His are the Washburn Island Oyster Company or whatever it's called.
Yeah, but it's still.
Right, but
All right.
anyway, so, questions, comments? I know.
This might help you, even though it's critical. I think you're up against a numerical problem. If this can help amounts of the order of 3%, then if you're a town meeting member and you think about that versus one of Kristen's maps of a sewer area or a geoboundary, and then you hear talk about build out and adaptive management, you think, which 3% of the houses aren't going to be forced to have an IA or a sewer? And you realize that it sort of gets lost in the noise.
The problem is the returns are so diffuse, both in time and space, that, as you said, it's a difficult sell because one Joe Q. public is going to say, that's going to be inconsequential to me.
Right, that's the problem you're up
And
against.
anyway, yes,
But
Ed.
that is saying, if I'm understanding it right, Tom, 1 acre gives you 3%. Or is it, how many acres?
Yes, 1 acre does, and right now we have 1.3 acres.
Right. So, if you suddenly got 3 acres, wow, that 3% becomes more significant. I think the thing I take out of this is it's an incredibly effective way to get some nitrogen out of an estuary. How widespread it can become is severely constrained by
Right.
all the things you listed. It's great technology, you get some great oysters that have financial value. So I would guess after the initial investment that you don't show here, how much this has cost,
Right.
it can become self-sustaining, that the farmers that we allow to use this
Right.
will be paying the town for the privilege and offsetting any cost out of pocket to the
Well,
town.
let me tell you about return to the town. The growers pay 7 cents an oyster. They rent, their only skin in the game is the seed oysters, which they have to buy and pay for the first year. The town owns the upwellers where the seed are developed and grow. The town owns the bags, all the gear. The town holds all the permits and everything, because our concern at the start was, well, what if one of our growers gets sick or something? We don't want someone else to have to start from scratch. So we hold the permits, and all these are private contractors to us. But anyway, that 7 cents an oyster they pay is for the first 282,000 oysters that they grow. So that's $19,600 per grower. So every year we get $59,000. I'm doing the math in my head, $59,000. This year, the $59,000 bought 510,000, 500,000 baby cohogs, which 2 weeks ago, Monday, we planted at 6 different spots in Falmouth. Some in the town, some in the recreational areas, and some in the commercial fishing area. So we're using the oyster cash flow to fund a clam flow back. Clams will do the same thing for us at about 3/4 of the amount of nitrogen per animal, but it takes 3 years for what these guys do in 8 months. Well, 18 months from start to finish, two growing seasons. So that's the other neat thing is in December, all the animals come out of the bag, they're taken up to the DPW garage, and they're put under ice until April. And we lose less than 0.1% of the animals. They're out of the water, they're under ice.
I have a 6:30 close.
Yeah,
close
no,
to
I
meeting.
know,
Okay,
I've gone on too
couple other
long.
items.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm gonna stop.
Are you good? Thank you, Tom, very good, very good.
So you want to spend a few oyster clams on clams?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is reports of members and staff, but before we get there, I want to look ahead to the month of August, if we can.
Yeah.
In years past, we've only had one meeting in August. I would like to try to hold 2 meetings in August so we can keep making progress on the geo-boundaries. And I'd like to propose the 14th and the 28th as the August meeting dates, unless somebody has a strong objection.
They
Kristen, you'll
sound good to me.
send out a request for those 2 dates, the 14th and the 28th. And that, Kim has stepped out of it. Kim's got something he's setting up for the 21st and 22nd for the pond, so that we'll be free if we want to go hear what they've got going on, okay? Anybody have, the committee, John, did you talk to the Board of Health?
I did 2 weeks ago, but nothing since our last meeting. I think they're probably going to meet this Monday night.
Okay. And who did we put on the pond committee? Was that you, Tom?
I'm the pond person, and their first meeting after the organizational meeting is this Thursday night at 7, but at 6:30, I've got 300 committee meeting. So Kim already knows this, and he's already left, and we've already communicated and talked about what's happening.
Jonathan, what are you doing Thursday night?
This Thursday?
Yeah,
I'm free.
The meeting's at 7 downstairs in the civil defense room.
yeah. You could be our alternate pond
Yeah, if
pond
you don't
committee
mind, that'd be
person.
great. I mean, Kim and I have already talked about what was going on in the meeting, and I don't have the agenda with me, but the main part of the meeting is Peter Johnson Staub explaining the implications of open meeting law to members.
Oh, good.
And they're trying to still decide where to focus their energies, and Kim and I are supposed to have a separate meeting probably next week to get on track with if anybody has any ideas about where they should be focusing their energy, feel free to let me know and I'll pass it on to them. But so far, they've got a really good group and they're organized and moving forward.
There's not many shy people on this board, so if somebody has an idea, I'm sure you'll hear it.
Yes.
Steve, you got an update?
Just a brief note, I had a really
This is tomorrow night.
good conversation with David Iorio Itzo, who came and spoke to us a few meetings ago from the county. And
it's at 7
he understood the need for having a price list, and he really intends to give us, and he understands it's a make versus buy, a do in-house or contract out option for us.
Yep.
And he might actually come up with some prices that would, if nothing else, would be useful to us for planning.
Good. Okay. And are you guys meeting every week or every other week?
Oh, this was a one-off call with him. The ball is in his court to come back to us.
Okay. All right. Any other reports? Anybody else dipping their fingers in the water someplace?
I've been playing in PRB potential for Snug Harbor portion of West Falmouth Harbor. I've reached out to a couple of agencies, including Corinne, who just today sent me a report that was done in 2014 by CDM for the town of Falmouth, DPW, about the feasibility or lack thereof of several locations. So I haven't done more than skim that report. The initial thing said, yeah, probably not a great idea in Snug Harbor. But technology has evolved significantly, I think, in that past decade. So I'm certainly not ready to abandon the effort. I did spend a couple of hours at low tide tromping around the Snug Harbor area, and it's appalling.
You didn't step on any eelgrass, did you?
There isn't any. There is, if you step into that muck, you'll sink to your waist, according to residents in the area that I spoke with. But it's visible that fresh water seeps right out of the bank at low tide. You can see it, you can feel it. There's been some analysis of that flow. Everything I've learned so far is that Snug Harbor is kind of the epicenter for where our wastewater plant nitrogen plume is getting into West Falmouth Harbor. Some of it may go deeper and out further, but Snug Harbor is an embarrassment to the town of Falmouth, quite honestly, in my estimation. Finding out that, yeah, there's a lot of very quick upwelling of groundwater, which we know has nitrogen from the plant right there, and other areas too. But, you know, from what I'm seeing, there is certainly potential to consider a study in detail of PRB using the EVO technology. I plan to reach out to Concom and others about this.
Ken, if there's a groundwater seep at Snug Harbor, how difficult is it to grab a sample and measure nitrogen?
Oh, we've been doing that since 2005.
Okay, so there is data already on
There's
that.
tons of data, millions of,
Okay.
gobs of
Ken's
data.
been giving
We
me
have a
some
whole
thoughts.
network of wells that we
Yeah,
monitor.
yeah,
So
I
there-
didn't know at that particular seep if we'd ever.
I mean, actually, I sent, so we've just submitted a paper on loading to the harbor and what the trajectory of loading has been since the upgrade to the wastewater plant to the journal Estuaries for consideration, and I gave Ed a draft of that to look at, so. It talks about, you know, how long, why the travel time seems to be so long.
Maybe when that's ready, we can put you up on the
Sure.
lectern. That'd be
It
great.
makes for interesting reading, and I'm getting one heck of an education in this. And I have several other groups that I plan on reaching out to. Say, I did hear from BBC, and they shared a report that the town funded back 10 years ago. But I'm going to talk to Concom about their concerns and, you know, about EVO into the ground, and also the Isotech people. Hey, what do you guys think based on your experience? So keep you posted.
Okay. All right, I guess we're gonna move on to the minutes of the prior meeting. I have one small correction that needs to be made, and that's under item 5, which says, since the Falmouth treatment plant is required to meet a 3 milligrams per liter effluent content, can we change that phrasing to the treatment plant has a target of 3 milligrams per liter? Amy got a hold of me and pointed out that along the way, we went from having a limit to targets.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and when it's target, unfortunately, there's wiggle room.
but we're under 3. We're consistent.
Yeah, no, we're on to 3, but I'm just saying.
Consistently
when
under
you-
3.
when we go to-
She just wanted to be certain that we weren't using the word limit, that we're using the word target.
And we're achieving it.
Oh, yeah, that's the beauty of it.
There, Corinne's sitting out here, I'm not sure that every single 365 days of the year, we are under 3, but we average under 3, and the plant runs very well all the time, these days. Yeah, and then it turns into a load limit. Okay, any other corrections to the minutes by anybody? Otherwise, we thank Kristen for writing them the first time, and for Tom providing the editorial services. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor of accepting the minutes? As noted. Is it unanimous? Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. I will allow it, even though under Robert's Rules of Order, there can be no discussion on a motion to adjourn.
Earl Barnhart, Green Center. I was interested in this sugar kelp. What are you going to do with all this sugar kelp when you're done?
Mix it with urine.
It's a saleable product.
Is it?
I've eaten it.
I mean,
didn't like it.
there's actually a sugar kelp industry in Maine.
Yes.
Where they raise it.
Loretta Roberson at MBL has been doing some work with sugar kelp aquaculture.
Scott Lindell did a lot of
Yeah, Scott also,
work
yeah.
with it, and I've had the sugar
think
kelp
they
that
have
we're growing here in Falmouth, and it just tastes like salt.
Yeah.
There's 3 main outlets. You could do food, and that's like really high quality, pristine leaves. You could do cosmetics, so it ends up in a lot of lotions and makeups, or it can be turned into fertilizer.
All right. Having heard the discussion about what do you do with kelp on the motion to adjourn? Okay, all those that are willing to adjourn, say by aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.